We have some fresh 9070 XT performance leaks, whether we can trust them or not, more on that in a minute. We have some deeper analysis of the 50 series performance estimates, and if we put those all together, we can get an idea of how things will maybe all stack up in the end. We've got some pricing leaks for the 9070 XT. Should we trust pricing leaks at this point? Probably not, but we could still talk about what kind of performance and pricing would make sense for a 9070 XT. At what point would you buy it? Speaking of pricing updates, the 5080, we have some prices up for the Gigabyte models over at Proshop, and unfortunately, many of them look to be way over MSRP. So is the 5080 MSRP gonna be a bit of a paper launch? I hope not. I hope we get lots of MSRP models, but we're only seeing one listed here. What's the supply gonna look like? More on that in a little bit. We get some more specs leaks for the 9070 XT, looking like it will be a 3 gigahertz boost clock card. And with Nvidia talking about multi-frame generation, what about the new lossless scaling version with times 20 frame gen mode? We're also getting the Intel Arc B570 launching at the end of this week, but apparently they're already on sale. But if you don't have review drivers, too bad for you. But speaking of review drivers and working on a 5070 review, I'm gonna want some of your guys' feedback on how to handle a 5070 review, sorry, a 570 review based on the CPU limited situations we're seeing from Hardware Unboxed and Hardware Canix reported. But let's swing that at the end of the video. Let's jump back into this whole, wait, 9070 XT benchmarks? Well, it's leaks and rumors territory. I'll show you the source. We'll make of it what we will. So the source is here. I found this at WCCF Tech. They're grabbing it from a ChipHell forum post, which has since been taken down. However, the poster on ChipHell appears to be reported as the a ChipHell moderator, as well as a GPU reviewer for ChipHell, meaning that it's not a random person there. So if this was going to be accurate, it would be a better source than just some random person on there. So I'm definitely gonna say massive grains of salt, but we could at least use this to fuel a discussion with, if this is the kind of performance we get, what sort of pricing would make sense? Now we've got Black Monkey results, which this is machine learning translated, so that is Black Myth Wukong. And we also have Cyberpunk results, and it's translating as super ray tracing preset at native resolution, so no DLSS involved here. Super RT isn't a mode in the English version. There is an RT Ultra mode, which is what I would assume this is, as opposed to the RT Overdrive. Also, if you look at the reported results for a 4080 Super and 4070 Ti Super, these results look too good for the RT Overdrive mode. Believe it or not, they would be even worse than this in RT Overdrive if you're not using DLSS, that's the key. But they look more in line with what you might expect from RT Ultra modes. So what that really then means, and I think, WCCF Tech did provide some bar charts here. I like the videocards.com analysis a bit better, where we get the everything all at once on one sheet along with some percentage differentials here. So if we take this as a ray tracing test in Cyberpunk and a non-RT test in Black Myth Wukong, because first of all, it didn't say RT, and these results don't seem to line up with, if you turn on full RT, the type of results you would actually get for the Nvidia GPUs where the performance is known. Then again, like I said, it looks like we have a non-RT result and an RT result. And in these results, it's looking like the 4070 Ti Super and the 9070 XT are roughly in line in RT Ultra in Cyberpunk. It's likely that if you kicked on the path tracing mode with RT Overdrive, that AMD would still fall further behind, because that's been the case in the past. But this does seem to be indicating that AMD's claims for their massively improved ray tracing might end up actually being true if you trust this rumor. But again, it's a rumor, it's a leak, who knows? Anyway, the non-RT results with Black Myth Wukong are showing it better than a 4070 Ti Super, and at 1080p resolution, it's almost matching the 4080 Super. It's within 2%. At 1440p, it's within 5% of the 4080 Super. And at 4K resolution, it's more splitting the difference. So it doesn't seem to scale as well at the higher resolutions as the 4080 Super does. Anyway, so if you do end up taking those performance numbers, you could then try to put it in line with the 50 series results. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and jump to the 50 series results. So these are official performance charts from Nvidia. I've talked about them before. The only difference is now it has some percentage differentials here. This is what you get if you pixel count it. But you actually don't need to pixel count it. And I was gonna do this myself, but then I was like, somebody on Reddit has definitely already done this. So I just searched pixel counting 50 series Reddit, and this popped right up. Look at that. And not only did this do the counting, this actually did most of the actual averaging performance numbers and whatnot that I was planning on doing myself. I'm not gonna reinvent the wheel. I did spot check it. It appears to be accurate. So we can just discuss this. That's awesome. So basically you take the 5070, 5070 Ti, 5080, and 5090 performance charts, and the important detail I talked about in my original video on these is that the only ones that are actually apples to apples comparisons are Far Cry 6 and A Plague Tale Requiem. These other results are comparing multi-frame gen versus not using multi-frame gen. And as I talked about in my recent video about frame generation, if two GPUs achieve the same performance via one using frame generation, the other one not, or in this case, one generating more frames, the other one half as many frames, then that means that while they have the same output frames per second, the responsiveness is not the same thing. So when measuring a GPU's raw power, it makes sense to not compare different levels of frame generation. So here, Far Cry 6 appears to be ray tracing without DLSS, and Plague Tale Requiem is DLSS and ray tracing, but not using the new multi-frame gen mode. So in other words, these are the more apples to apples comparisons, although it is important to note, these do use ray tracing, and sometimes ray tracing improvements for a generation are different than the non-RT performance improvements for a generation. Also, this is only 2 games. 2 games might have been chosen to be representative of the types of performance games that you'll get, or they could have been cherry-picked as the best possible results to make this look as good as possible, and then average results will come out less. Until we get independent reviews, we don't know which this is, but we can average these two results and then use that to get some idea of how this would stack up with the 40 series. So here's the actual calculation, and what they also mentioned is that you don't actually need to pixel count this. This post is acknowledging that the file format of those charts from Nvidia mean that if you import it into the correct program, it can count the differentials for you, which is awesome. So these are completely accurate based on Nvidia's first-party claims. Whether or not those are representative or chosen to be, a best-case scenario, we don't know, right? Anyway. So here is what we get for the end results. The 5090 versus the 4090 comes out about 35% faster if you average the 2 results. The 5080 versus the 4080 also comes out around 35, again, it's 34 here, right? It looks like they're going for about a 35% performance improvement generationally. That's where they all basically fall. Again, the different games giving different results, but if you average them out, that's where we end up at. Now, how accurate would this be based on Nvidia's claims? Again, we can't know for sure, although he does have the interesting comment here saying that he did this last time with the 40 series and 30 series based on Nvidia's charts. And he said that last time, it wasn't wildly inaccurate. He said that the 4090 was estimated to be 1.63 to 1.85 versus the 3090 based on Nvidia's charts when you do the same kind of thing for 40 series versus 30 series. And in reality, it came out closer to 1.69. So it was in between, although not an exact average. And the 4080 was estimated between 40 and 50% faster than the 3080, and in reality, it came out closer to 50%. So again, not an exact average of the two. So in other words, it's very likely that this exact average between these two results is not likely to be the exact result we get when somebody does like a 40 game average or something like that. But it's also probably not wildly inaccurate, at least compared to what Nvidia did last time around. Maybe they made different decisions this time around, right? So not only was I already going to do these averages for you, but it was already done for me, I was then going to line this up with the Tech Power Up relative performance charts and get an idea of where these fall compared to both AMD and Nvidia GPUs. And yet this guy already did it. I mean, seriously, thank you, dude. Like, this saved me hours. And again, spot checking what he's done, great. So anyway, Nestle Drink, you're awesome. Anyway, all my sources will be linked in the video description. But that means that we get this chart if we zoom in on it. So this is pretty interesting because then we can see that, again, there is some speculation here, despite the fact that this is NVIDIA's official charts, right? We don't know if this will actually represent the average performance uplift. But it does mean that if you do go run with this, the 5070 ends up basically tied with the 4070 Ti Super if you insert it within Tech PowerUp's results. That would be interesting. The 4070 Ti Super, though, is a 16GB VRAM card, and the 5070 is only a 12GB VRAM card. Now, the 5070 will have the new software feature of multi-frame gen, so if that ends up being a very good feature that you'd want to use, then you have something, kind of balancing that out. But the other thing to note is the 4070 Ti Super was an $800 card, and usually has maintained that MSRP. And the 5070 is launching at $550. So that, seems pretty interesting, honestly. So other than the 12 gigabytes on the 5070, that sounds pretty decent. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 5070 Ti. So again, if you apply the average performance scaling update, it ends up faster than a 4080 Super. It does not end up anywhere near as fast as a 4090. And the 5070 Ti will have 16 gigabytes of VRAM like a 4080 Super, and will have access to the new multi-frame generation. So overall, the 5070 Ti, again, they're pricing it at MSRP of $750. Does appear to then be faster than the 4080 Super, which had a $1,000 MSRP in the previous generation, have the same VRAM, have the new multi-frame gen feature. So if these performance numbers end up being accurate, again, I would consider that a pretty reasonable generational upgrade. I'm not going to go say it's like the most mind-blowing thing we've ever seen ever, but it seems fairly solid, even if you throw out the multi-frame gen marketing BS. Now, the RTX 5090, at a 35% performance uplift, obviously ends up on the top of the charts. But here's kind of the disappointing thing. Well, I guess I kind of skipped over the 5080. So the 5080 ends up above the 4090, not by a mind-blowing amount, but it does end up above it. So by the way, the early performance rumors for the 5080 was that it was targeting a little bit faster than a 4090. I think the rumors were around 10% faster than a 4090. Based on the specs, people were questioning that. But again, based on NVIDIA's own claimed first-party slides, it appears to deliver. However, again, that's a 2-game sample that could very well be cherry-picked. I need to keep repeating that so we're clear. This isn't for sure guaranteed results on average. Anyway, but this would be in line with the 5080 beating a 4090. Now, the 5080 has 16 gigabytes of VRAM versus the 4090 having 24, so it's not totally better, even if this does end up being true. But it would have access to the new multi-frame gen. It's not... and again, it's coming in, the 5080 coming in at $999 versus the 4090 being $1,600 MSRP. That is quite a big difference there. Then the 5090, again, with the rumored 35% faster than a 4090, puts it, 35% faster than a 4090, which was the top end that we had previously. But this is the one that's least exciting, actually, because this one comes with a $2,000 MSRP compared to the 4090, which I'm pretty sure was a $1,600 MSRP. Was it 15? I'm pretty sure it was 16. Anyway, here's my point. If you look at that, 2,000 divided by 1,600, that's a 25% price increase for the 5090. Whereas if the performance increase is only about 35%, then that means that the generational performance per dollar improvement, the value improvement at the high end, isn't improving a whole heck of a lot. So it's actually looking like the 5090 will be delivering the worst value improvement of the generation that they've revealed so far. Because additionally, the 5070 Ti and the 5070 are coming in with $50 MSRP cuts. The 5080 is technically a $200 MSRP cut compared to the 4080, although there was the 4080 Super in the meantime, which did come in at the $999 and was basically just readjusting the price of the 4080 because it was too expensive at launch. Now, how does this stack up generationally against, because when you're deciding, is this something I should be excited about? I recently looked at the 60 series cards, so to be clear, we're talking about 5070 class, 5080 class, 90 class cards. I haven't updated my info for those, but when we looked at 60 class cards in a recent video and their price to performance uplift generationally, you know, a 35%-ish result would actually be fairly good. Now, that's the 60 class. Like I said, I haven't updated it for these classes. And remember that some performance generations were much better than that. We're seeing some results in the, you know, 50, 60, 70% range, although some less. The difference is that when you then compare MSRP changes, then the price to performance ratios end up coming out, and you know, the 20 to 30% range being fairly typical. So with that in mind, if we are ending up getting, you know, 35% performance uplifts, with a lot of the MSRPs actually decreasing, that could push the performance per dollar uplift past 35% or so. If these again, first-party results aren't completely cherry-picked, then this looks like a fairly reasonable generation. So that's kind of cool. And it also comes with the additional software feature. So I would hate it if the generation's only thing was the new software feature. But if it's actually delivering decent performance gains generationally and the new software feature, with MSRPs actually cut a little bit except for the 90 class, then this looks pretty decent. Which then asks the question, a couple of things. First of all, are the cards actually going to stick to their MSRP? And secondly, what is AMD going to do? So let's look at some pricing information. First of all, we do have some GPUs being listed for the 5080, because remember the 5080 and 5090 go on sale first. It's going to be a lighter colored background, so flashbang warning. It's not pure white, but here we go. Anyway, so this is Proshop. Now, Proshop is a European retailer, and they have listed their Gigabyte 5080s. Now that this is after the official MSRP announcement, I would now start actually trusting prices listed online. Whereas prior to the official announcement, I was cautioning that these could very likely be placeholders. Now, speaking of that, in the leaked prices we saw ahead of time before CES, we were seeing numbers crazy high like this in the 1,600-1,700 euro range. And I was cautioning that those could very well be placeholders. And if we scroll down here, there is an MSRP model at the 1229, which if you look at the European MSRP, I think does line up for this region. So, and again, remember European prices include VAT, US prices and MSRP is pre-VAT. I believe this is the pre-VAT price here at the 979 euros. Anyway, so the point is, there is a model at the MSRP. But the next model up jumps 200 euros, and then another over 100 euros from there. And then we've got models another 100 euros or more up from there. So here's the thing, right? That 5080 and that 34% uplift and coming in at that 999 sounds fairly reasonable if you can get them at 999. So the fact that the 5090 is coming in at $2,000 means that AIB partners have $1,000 of wiggle room to play with on the pricing of their various cooler models. And what we're seeing at Proshop there shows that they're probably gonna use that. And that's a little bit scary. Now, there was an MSRP model listed. So I'm a little bit worried about AIB partners and how far above Nvidia's MSRP pricing they might end up, at least on the 5080 specifically, because of how much headroom there is to increase the price before you start getting into 5090 territory. Now, so thoughts on that. So what could anchor the price at that MSRP? One is if Nvidia has a large supply of MSRP founders models. That would force prices to stay closer to that line, because if those are in good supply and it's a good cooler, then people just buy those if everything else is way overpriced. But if Nvidia is not supplying a massive amount of those, and I think that tends to be the case, it's a little more limited kind of around launch, and they restock occasionally, but it's not necessarily a massive supply, then you're kind of relying on the AIB partners to continue producing MSRP models. Now, I think whether they continue to produce a lot of MSRP models or whether they go to those 1,600 euro models, like which ones do they end up restocking, right? Probably based on what people are willing to buy. So this is where the vote with your wallet thing is kind of important, right? If people just don't buy those 1,600 euro models, then they're not going to restock a bunch of those. They'll probably restock closer to MSRP. But if people are willing to buy those expensive models, they'll probably try to start barely restocking the MSRP models and going with the way higher margin products. So it's probably going to react a lot to consumers and what we do. Now with the 50 series, with the 40 series last generation, with the 4090 pricing was closer to the 4080 pricing, and so if you went too high on the 4080, you might as well buy the 4090. Whereas now they've widened that gap at the high end, so it's leaving that additional space. That being said, though, with the 40 series, the $1,200 4080 pricing didn't seem to sell particularly well, and that kind of seems to have forced Nvidia to reduce the pricing when they launched the 4080 Super at $999. That was effectively just a price cut. So I'm hoping that indicates that the market won't go over $1,000 for the 5080 and that it will stay there, but I'm a bit nervous. All of the other models, you kind of have the same issue happening, but because there's a tier above them that's not a $1,000 swing, there's less room to swing too high above the MSRP. Now, the other thing that can anchor pricing is competition from AMD. So why don't we talk a bit about that again? So the sad truth is a lot of people root for AMD GPUs because they want competition to reduce the price of the Nvidia GPU, and they just end up buying that. That's the let's hope that doesn't keep happening. Let's hope AMD comes in with a product that's actually worth buying and it's aggressively priced. There is a model listed for $530 right now online. Now it's an AIB custom model, which could mean that would, even if this price was accurate, that would be somewhat above the official MSRP. It's also very likely that this is just a placeholder price and you shouldn't read too much into it. So it's completely possible that this is utter nonsense. So I'm just gonna throw it out there as that's the latest pricing leak. There's also been a rumor discussed that the MSRP pricing could be targeting around $479, but that was literally just a tweet that somebody said this is a rumored pricing with no evidence to go off of whatsoever. The truth is AMD is likely still evaluating based on what they saw Nvidia do at CES. There's been a lot more interviews now published with AMD representatives who would be in the know on all of this, like Frank Azor. Frank Azor will not comment on the pricing specifically, but in interviews like this, I'm linking this one in the video description, as well as others where he's asked similar questions. If I can kind of summarize the gist of what he's saying, none of it's too specific. It sounds like AMD is, like he's saying here, about listen to feedback. This was in the context of being mindful of, in their previous GPU launches, some have been priced way more aggressively than others. And the ones, he seems to indicate that the ones that offered a better balance of value to performance performed better in the market. People were more excited, and he's saying that they've listened to that type of feedback. So that's one thing. Although he is not saying anything more specific than, we're not launching a $1,000 GPU. So, cost less than $1,000 confirmed. Is it $999? Probably not, but we can't know for sure, right? But anyway, he's saying that they're definitely looking into getting market share, looking at where people are actually buying products. So there's that. He's also talking about the fact that we should expect a larger reveal for the Radeon products fairly soon. And it was somewhat hinted in some interviews, he says it a little more clearly than others, but it seemed to be indicating that the speculation that AMD was kind of waiting to see what Nvidia did at CES to make sure that they were evaluating that and also having their own presentation that wasn't overshadowed. So it's kind of a combination of, we want to talk about this when the focus is on us, but also that gives them the chance to go second, which means see what Nvidia actually priced it as, and then make sure that they're taking that into account when they price their products. All of that sounds pretty good. Also, he did comment on performance in the context of, he was asked if the performance leaks prior to CES, now that's important, prior to CES, were true. And he said that they're false, and then when pressed on, is the real performance better or worse, he says better, compared to the ones that he's thinking of. But he doesn't specify which ones he's thinking of, and there was a variety of performance leaks prior to CES. One of them was claimed to be a TimeSpy score that will only put it in line with something like the 7900 GRE. In which case, if he's referring to that, he's just saying it's better than that. The more common rumor seemed to be putting it more in line with the 7900 XTX or 4080 Super, but maybe 5 to 10% slower. but with a lot better ray tracing performance than the previous AMD generation. If that ends up being the one he's saying that no, it's actually better then that's really exciting. But since he's not clarifying which one he's actually talking about, and when he says better by how much, we really don't know. But then we have, like I started the video with, these claimed results for Cyberpunk and Black Myth Wukong. Now, AMD representatives like him have also said that AIB partners don't have the actual gaming drivers yet. However, the source of these leaks claims to have got their hands on the review driver, and the reviewed, or at least a fully working driver from AMD. And I mean, that is just software that can get shared around. It's not out of the realm of possibility that this could be correct. But again, take this in mind with a massive grain of salt. But how about we go ahead and play around with these numbers and kind of line them up into this chart that we had with the new Nvidia results, just to get an idea of what would seem like, if that is about the performance numbers that we're gonna get, how that ends up playing into it. So again, so what did this tell us? It said that the 9070 XT probably has ray tracing performance along the lines of a 4070 Ti Super, at least in pretty heavy workloads, but maybe not the full-on path tracing modes. But that its non-RT performance, depending on which resolution you're looking at, is either really close to a 4080 Super, or, you know, within 10% of a 4080 Super, depending on the resolution of the results we're looking at here. But definitely better rasterized performance than a 4070 Ti Super. So if we then jump back to this chart, well, where is the 4070 Ti Super and the 4080 Super? They're here. Which GPUs are kind of matching that in the 50 series? Well, the 5070 Ti, according to Nvidia's claims, which could be cherry-picked, we don't know, but I gotta keep emphasizing that. That puts that above the leaked results we're seeing for the 9070 XT. And the 5070 results seem to be a bit lower than the rasterized performance results we're seeing on the from the leak. But again, both of these are just going off of 2 games, right? Anyway, so this is all very speculative. But the 4070 Ti Super, again, matching the 5070 means that would maybe indicate that the 9070 XT would have similar ray tracing performance to even a 5070. And then probably better rasterized performance. Also, the 5070 has 12 gigabytes of VRAM. The 9070 XT has 16. So if we take all of that together, what would make sense pricing-wise, right? So let's say that it's almost or as fast as a 5070 at ray tracing, and beats it at rasterized performance, but falls short of the 5070 Ti. That's interesting, especially if it has more VRAM than the 5070. Now, the 5070 MSRP is $550. So here's the thing, the realistic thing for AMD, though, when thinking about pricing, now whether they'll go with this or not, and I don't know if AMD is watching my video today, but if you're still thinking about the pricing that you're gonna announce, you gotta think about this, right? Nvidia has the mind share. People are going to default to buying Nvidia. You have to convince them otherwise in a dramatic way. That's just the reality of the situation when you look at market share and marketing and all of that. So if you have a card that's as fast as the RTX 5070 in ray tracing, beats it at least a bit in rasterized performance, and you've updated your upscaler with FSR4 to be at least almost as good as DLSS, or at least closer to DLSS, although DLSS is getting updated to the transformer model. So if I had to guess, FSR4 is still not going to be as good as DLSS, but at least it's maybe closing the gap a bit, becoming more usable. Those all sound great. Also, if you're beating the 5070 with 16 gigabytes of VRAM instead of 12. So the thing is, all of those things could be true, but I still think if you price it equal to the 5070, more people will buy the 5070. I think you need to beat the 5070's price point. I just think that's the reality. And I think you need to do it noticeably so, not just by $20, which means if we go with this leaked price at $530, which I think is, like I said, probably nonsense, but it gives us a talking point, right? If the 9070 XT comes in $20 less than a 4070, then you can essentially call them the same price when it comes to a buying decision. So if it's priced the same, or might as well be the same as a 5070, I think people will still buy the 5070 even if it's slower, just because of the Nvidia mind share and market share lead. So I think you'd have to go under $500. Like, if people just in their head look at $499 and then they look at, $549, those feel different even if they're not mind-blowingly apart. And then the further lower you go, like if you undercut it by $100, right? So I wonder how aggressive AMD is both willing to go and what is their actual costs to manufacture, how low can they go and still be making any sort of a profit, right? So that's where the question comes in. So maybe I'll throw this to you guys. You could let me know in the comment section. If the 9070 XT can match the ray tracing performance of a 5070, beat it at least a bit in rasterized performance, you've got your FSR 4 update and it actually looks good in independent testing. It has 16 gigabytes of VRAM versus the 12 on the 5070. Would you buy it if it cost about the same as a 5070, or how much lower would it need to be for you to go with the AMD brand? I'm honestly not sure where it needs to be, but I do think they still need to undercut the 5070 even if they beat it in performance. That's my thoughts. If they're trying to stack it up against the 5070 Ti, then if the leaked performance that we're seeing here ends up having underperformed, if it ends up being much closer to the 5070 Ti, then maybe they can get away with a bit higher pricing or something like that. But we'll really have to see how all these come. There's so much speculation going on in all of this that we should maybe just move on. Now, the other information we have on the 9070 XT is the 3 gigahertz boost clock. So Videocards.com is claiming from their own sources, which most likely is within the AIB companies themselves. They're just not going to be able to call them out without getting them in trouble. Videocards.com, usually when they make this claim, it does end up being accurate. They're seeing that the power color cards have all their boost and base clocks revealed for both the 9070 XT and non-XT models. We're basically seeing that the XT models all are either a little above or a little below a 3 gigahertz boost clock, which looks pretty big, and the base clocks being around 24 to 2500 megahertz. The 9070 non-XTs seem to be clocked a lot lower, which appears to be around a little over 2000, maybe up to 2200 for the game clocks. And then the boost clocks going up to, looks like around 25 to 2700, depending on the cooler model available. So pretty noticeably lower clocks compared to the XT versions. Now, how much the XT and the non-XT differ in specs? They're claiming a core differential of 4096 versus 3584. And this ends up being what they have for us so far as that leaked information. Pretty interesting. They're also claiming to have the announcement date coming on January 15th. Now, that's pretty specific, but again, AMD has mentioned that they will have an official announcement of all of this shortly. So maybe we'll have answers to all of our questions on the 15th. I hope so. That would be really cool. Last couple quick things I'm going to mention is Lossless scaling is out with an update with an up to times 20 frame generation mode. A lot of people have been asking me to test this independently. I need to work on my Arc B570 review. I don't think I'm going to have time. That being said, Ancient Gameplays has tested it out, and I would say that if you were excited about the times 20 mode, I'm just going to play you a super short clip and then watch his full video if you're really interested in this product. Watch how shaky things get. Like, that's not even moving. And then when he spins the camera, things get absolutely wild. Anyway, watch the full Ancient Gameplays video. It'll be linked in the video description if you want some really nice testing on this. Go ahead and just look at that. Anyway, so it looks like really the times 20 mode is kind of fun to play around with, but it's not going to be something you would really do. Also, side comment for the people saying that, oh, NVIDIA's new multi-frame gen mode is just lossless scaling, just buy the app for $6. It is really important to be fair about this. Lossless scaling is not directly integrated into games, so it has less access to game data when it does its interpolation. So they are definitely of lower quality than what NVIDIA is doing. DLSS multi-frame generation will definitely look better than the ×3 and ×4 modes from lossless scaling because it has access to actual game data. So I would not say it's fair to say just download lossless scaling for $6 and you have the new version of DLSS. That's unfair. Anyway, let's also go with the Intel Arc B570 going on sale at Micro Center ahead of launch. What? Well, without the review drivers, you can't buy them anyway, but that's certainly kind of interesting. Last thing I'll say is I'm in a bit of a conundrum working on my B570 review because there's information coming out with the B580 from Hardware Unboxed and Hardware Canix that if you review on a lower end processor, the B580 has way more CPU overhead than AMD and Nvidia do, and ends up underperforming compared to what you usually do in GPU benchmarks, which is use a high-end CPU to eliminate a CPU bottleneck, because that shows the true performance of the GPU. But if there's so much CPU overhead that it gets bottlenecked at low enough frame rates that it actually impacts gaming performance on the kind of CPU that you would normally do. Hardware Unboxed looked at the Ryzen 5 5600. Hardware Mechanics looked at an Intel processor with the 9600K. And yes, they're all using resizable bar. That's interesting. So I'd really need to figure out what I'm going to do here, because it takes a massive amount of time to retest everything on multiple CPUs. But anyway, that's for me to figure out. I hope all of you have an excellent day.